I want to talk about piston and connecting rod for inspection, disassembly, and assembly. Unscrew the connecting rod cap mounting bolts to remove the connecting rod cap. Then, remove the piston assembly by pushing it from the crank side toward the cylinder head. When unscrewing the connecting rod cap mounting bolts, do not use an impact wrench. Keep the removed parts safely by organizing and marking them by their corresponding cylinders. Unscrew the main bearing cap mounting bolts and remove the bearing cap. Then, remove the crankshaft. Set the crank gear removal jig to the crankshaft assembly to remove the crank gear. And then, pull out the parallel key and unscrew the CPS wheel mounting countersunk head bolts to remove the CPS wheel. Be careful not to damage the bearing during crankshaft removal, and keep the removed parts safely by organizing and marking them by their corresponding cylinders. Remove the tappet in the cylinder block using a magnet. Then, remove the piston nozzle jet relief valve and piston cooling jet. Measure the outside diameter of the piston using a micrometer, setting it perpendicular to the piston skirt and piston pin. If the measurement is over the allowable limit, replace it with a new genuine part. Measure the clearance between the piston ring and groove. If the measurement is over the allowable limit, replace the part with a new one. If the measurement is still out of the allowable limit after replacing the piston ring, replace the piston. Remove the piston ring with a plier and insert it to the inside of the cylinder. After inserting the piston head side into the cylinder, and adjusting the internal piston ring to a horizontal position, use a feeler gauge to measure the piston ring end gap. Measure the inside diameter of the piston pin hole and outside diameter of the piston pin. If the measurement is over the allowable limit, replace it with a new genuine one. Measure the inside diameter of the connecting rod bushing and outside diameter of the piston pin. If the measurement is over the allowable limit, replace it with a new genuine one. Measure the twist and parallelism at the big end and small end of the connecting rod. If the measurement result is out of the allowable limit, replace the connecting rod. Fit the bearing to the big end of the connecting rod and tighten the connecting rod cap to the specified torque. Then, measure the inside diameter of the bearing. Calculate the oil clearance of the connecting rod bearing by measuring the outside diameter of the crankshaft pin section and subtracting this measurement from the inside diameter of the bearing. If the oil clearance is over the allowable limit, replace the bearing with a new genuine one and check the clearance again after replacement. If the clearance is still over the allowable limit, use the undersized bearing. In this case, grind the pin of the crankshaft to the undersize. Install the main bearing to its cap and crankcase and tighten the main bearing cap to the specified torque. Then, measure the inside diameter of the bearing. Calculate the oil clearance of the bearing by measuring the outside diameter of the crankshaft journal section and subtracting this measurement from the inside diameter of the bearing. If the oil clearance is over the allowable limit, use the undersize bearing and grind the crankshaft journal section to the undersize according to the table. Measure the end play of the crankshaft, and if there is no end play at all, loosen the cap bolt slightly and tighten it again. If the measurement is over the allowable limit, replace the bearing with a new genuine part. Support the front and rear journal sections of the crankshaft with a block. Measure the runout of the center journal section with a dial gauge. If the measurement is too small, grind the shaft. If the measurement is too large, replace the shaft. If the measurement is over the allowable limit, replace the crankshaft. Measure the inside diameter and cylindricity of the cylinders with a cylinder gauge. If the measurement of any cylinder is over the allowable limit, bore all the cylinders and replace the pistons and piston rings with the oversized ones. Measure at 3 locations each in direction A and B as shown in the figure. There are 2 oversized pistons. Correct the piston according to the maximum inside diameter of the cylinders. Measure the outside diameter of the piston as shown in the video. After measuring the outside diameter of the piston, calculate the size for correction. Measure the distortion of flatness of the top of the crankcase with a straight edge and feeler gauge. If the measurement is over the allowable limit, grind the top to the correct size. Check if its mating surface with the camshaft is unevenly worn. Replace it as necessary. Measure the clearance between the tappet and crankcase tappet guide hole. If the measurement is over the allowable limit, replace the tappet. Taking care not to damage the cylinder head bottom surface. Remove residue of old gasket. Set the crankcase onto a workbench and set its cylinder head surface downwards. Apply clean oil to the tappet and install it to the tappet hole of the crankcase. Install the piston cooling jet to the crankcase. Install the main bearings to the crankcase and bearing cap. Then, apply clean oil to the inside of the main bearing. Put the crankshaft onto the crankcase. Match the bearing cap's number and direction correctly before installing them. Tighten the bearing cap bolts to the specified torque in the specified order. Ensure that the crankshaft rotates freely. Check the side clearance of the crankshaft. Install the oil ring and compression ring of the piston. Install the snap ring to the piston and combine the piston pin with the connecting rod. Then, install the snap ring and apply clean oil to the piston pin. Turn the crankcase 90 degrees. Turn the crankshaft to set the pin of crankcase at the top dead center position. Apply clean oil to the inside of the cylinder and piston and set the piston ring gap at the 120 degree position. Insert the piston into the cylinder. When installing the piston, the arrow mark on the piston head should be installed to the gear case side. Compress the piston ring using a compression jig and insert the piston into the cylinder. Install the connecting rod cap from the other side. Tighten the connecting rod cap bolts to the specified torque in the cylinder order. Check the side clearance of the connecting rod. This concludes the explanation of the piston and connecting rod for inspection, disassembly, and assembly.